Thank you for coming. Welcome to our mini-series on World War II 80th anniversary. We are really happy that all of you came to sort of celebrate and commemorate this event with us. And we had already a lecture downstairs by Professor Paces on Lidice. This second part will be about oral history, about memories coming from those people who lived through World War II. Some of them will be recorded, and some of those people who still live there are in the audience, and they will share their memories later tonight. I'll do a little promo for something that's coming very soon. This is a part of Václav Havel rehearsal for True Festival, and in fact, 2 our members of Czechoslovak Society of Arts and Scientists are participating in this. The other one is our next lecture in June, will be about the power of ideas, about Czech greenways, and it will be given by Steven Jařábek. So if you want more information about this event, please talk to Susanna Halsey, who is in the back. It's like the main spirit of Czechoslovak Society, because she has more details, and it's one of the other activities she's very heavily involved in. So before we start with our main program today, let me introduce our speaker. It's Julie Urbišová. Julia is a journalist, she's a documentarist, author, yoga teacher, mother, jazz lover, and an avid reader, not necessarily in that order. And just to let me tell you a little bit more about her. So she studied ethnology and journalism at Charles University, and then she worked on several projects for Czech TV, for Czech National Radio. And in 2007, she relocated to the United States, to New Orleans. And after settling there with her Turkish husband, she started to provide also documentaries like from the other side of the ocean for Czech audience. So one of those projects was Doma v Nula, about the life in New Orleans, and there is a book based on that. One of her most recent endeavors is Doma ve státech. It's a podcast. I don't know what was your first podcast that you started to sort of regularly follow, but for me it was this one, and it almost like introduced me to the world of podcasts. And I have totally recommend it to anybody who is interested, especially in different Czechs and how they live in the US, and to what like all these interesting stories that Julia gathers. So what is really interesting that today is the first time that I met Julia in person, but I feel as if we've known each other for years. And it's probably because we share several interests, and also because I really admire her passion and perseverance with which she pursues many of those interests of hers. And one of them is collecting memories, collecting oral history for this huge oral history archive called Paměť národa, Memory of Nations. And today she'll tell us more about that. So I'm giving the floor to Julia. Welcome.
Hello, and thank you so much for the introduction. It is my pleasure to be here. I came on an early morning flight from New Orleans, and I was very much surprised how cold it is in New York. Because we are definitely in our shorts and flip-flops outfit down there already. But we can make it. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you to Professor Paces for the beautiful lecture that we just heard about Lidice. And today is going to be all about memories of those who survived the Second World War. It will be all about very strong stories. And let me introduce you the company that I work for, which Vera already introduced. It's called the Memory of Nations. And we've been collecting stories since early 90s. We started to interview the last survivors of the First World War, actually, and of the members of the Czechoslovak Legion. And later on, we realized that the project can be going on and on. As we start interview the Second World War survivors, the Holocaust survivors, and later on the communist regime stories, and so on. As you can see, we also interviewed the former president Václav Havel. We already, in our archive, have more than 16,000 testimonies. You can look it up online. We also have English version. And basically, our online archive is there for public. We do it for students, teachers, for journalists who are interested in Czech topics and they can use it. We are very proud to be part of many, many projects around Czech Republic and the whole world when we introduce different kind of topics from Czechoslovak history in different exhibits, projects, and as you can see also theater. As we mentioned, we are celebrating, commemorating the end of the Second World War. It's been 80 years since the war ended in Europe. And we've been lucky enough to not only interview Czech people, but we also try to implement people somehow connected with the Czechoslovak history. And since we are in New York today, in America, I thought that it would be wonderful just to start the lecture with a memory of one of those who liberated Czechoslovakia. This is Mr. Earl Ingram. One of my colleagues interviewed him in 2013 when he came to Pilsen. As you might know, most of the Czechoslovakia was liberated by the Red Army, but part of Czechoslovakia, the western part, including the big city Pilsen, was liberated by the American Army, and it was liberated two days before Prague. Prague was liberated on May 8th, and Pilsen already on May 6th. So let's listen how he remembers those days.
Why do you keep returning to Pilsen each year? And I had to think about really a short answer for that, and I think about we commemorate those who were not fortunate like I've been fortunate enough to live to get to Pilsen and to live to return. I come to commemorate those. But the other thing is where the joy comes in seeing all the people that I met in 1945 and now in 2013, who are finally being rewarded with what they thought they had in May of 1945. But they had it, they lost it. It was up and down, freedom, no freedom, freedom, no freedom. But now the freedom is here, and I am really pleased to see the people enjoy it, and I enjoy celebrating with them. During my service in the Army, I was stationed in Germany, in Stuttgart, and my duties required me to move to the border. I visited major units on the border, and there were times when I would fly in a small airplane over the border down in southern part of Western Germany at that time, and I could look over the wire fence, the electric fence, and I could see the beautiful countryside. I knew about the people who lived on that other side, but I never thought that I would be able to come back here.
As you can see and hear, since 2013, many things changed. He's mentioning the freedom, no freedom, freedom, no freedom. Right now we are kind of, in a difficult situation in Europe again, so I thought this was a really interesting part of his interview to just remind it to ourselves that it's very, very fragile to lose freedom. I have one more clip prepared because it is very emotional to listen to these American soldiers who, even though they couldn't come visit the country for many years, obviously because of the communist regime, right after the revolution in 1989, they really just start coming to the celebration held every year, and they tried to find those people who they were actually in touch or who they were hanging out with while they stayed right at the end of the Second World War. So let's listen next.
He and his wife, they took my wife and me to that area, and we drove around, and I could not identify. I was looking for one specific building, which was a theater, movie theater, which was used by my company for a company mess hall, a kitchen, and where the men ate, and also the company headquarters. And I knew that my platoon stayed in apartment buildings just down the street, and I knew exactly which building I stayed in. I saw her coming down the stairs, And I turned to my wife, I said, I know that lady, because her features had not changed so much that I could not recognize her. And the interpreter told her what was going on. I'm Ingram. And she came down close to me. And she said, I don't see very well anymore. And she came down real close. She took my face in her hands. She turned it this way, she turned it that way. She said, that's Ingram. But we had a great reunion.
So obviously people were grateful for what the American soldiers did for them, because not only they brought freedom for them, but they also brought material aid, which came from United States. I will move on to my story now. One country, one war, 4 different stories. I picked 4 different stories of Czech Americans from all around the US that I was so happy to meet and listen to their stories. And this is something that I've been actually doing my whole life. The oral history is something that I really lived with my whole life, because I'm from a region which is a very specific region in the Czechoslovak Republic, before now Czech Republic. It's called Hlučínsko, also Hulčiner area region, and it's an area where the history played with people over and over. We were always part of the Slavic nation and area until 1742, when the Emperor Mary Teresa lost us in a war with Prussia, and we became part of Prussia. Later on, after First World War, we were part of the newly formed Czechoslovak Republic, and only until 1938, when right after the Munich Agreement, we were taken again to the Third Reich, to the real Germany, based on our history with Prussia. So why I'm saying it is that all the men from our region, including my grandfather and great-grandfather from the other side, had to go to German army. And it's been very, very difficult to live with, fact like that. But what I'm also saying is that I've been listening to these stories my whole life, because like every family from my village had a war story. Either they lost their grandpa, their uncle was in the prison of war in Soviet Union until, let's say, 1952, and so on and so on. And this is where my interest in history and in people's stories actually started. So we will focus today on, of course, the childhood of those people I talked to, because, of course, they were little children. As I said, it's going to be 4 different stories from 4 different environments, but all of them have the common thing. They all ended up immigrating to America, all in different kind of stages. The first person, she came here right after the communist putsch in 1948. The other person came in 59. The third person came after the Soviet occupation in 68, and the fourth in 84. And you can see how the Czechoslovak immigration actually was changing during those times. So maybe some of you know this name, Zuzana Justman. Miss Zuzana Justman is actually from New York. She was born in 1931. Her story is one of the strongest stories I've ever heard in my life, and I was really, really happy to meet her. She was born into a privileged, assimilated Jewish family in Prague. Her father's side was a family of businessmen, let's say. They owned a factory called Bratři Pikové, which means like brothers pick, and it was a factory that was producing paper. Her mother's side, her maternal grandfather, his name was Stoyer, and he owned a factory for liquor in the Prague's neighborhood of Holešovice. So she was from a family of very privileged First Republic kind of businessmen, and that's also that's the lifestyle they had. Later on, obviously, for the reasons that they were with Jewish heritage, they ended up going to Terezín camp, and later on her father died in Auschwitz. But let's go slowly. This is Miss Zuzana on the left side. In the middle, it's her parents when they first met, and on the right side, this is Zuzana's older brother. He was later on very famous writer and author in Czechoslovakia. As you can see, her mother is a beautiful lady. Miss Zuzana was always telling me how her mom was really part of those old times. And she was dressed at this famous Rosenbaum salon in Prague, and she was really enjoying her social life. As Zuzana was also recalling that her governess, Fridolina, was more like her mother, honestly, that she was spending more time with her. And it's just the lovely, lovely memories of those times. What I want to focus on also is that we not only collect interviews, but we also always ask the people we talk to for their archive pictures and any kind of documents. And we also discuss those topics with historians or with archives, just to make the story a full story. One of the families that Zuzana's parents were friends with was Masaryk family. Jan Masaryk, later on the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the son of Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk, the first Czechoslovak president, was a friend of Zuzana's father. This is a note that Jan Masaryk wrote to Zuzana when she was a little girl. You can see, if you speak Czech, it's been dated of January 4th, 1938. It's a typical, I would say, Masaryk's note. Like, he was known as a little like funny and silly man who liked children. So if you understand Czech, you can see. If not, I would just shortly say that he says something like, we miss you so much, little Zuzanka. We had this and this for lunch, and say greetings to your mommy. And then he puts a couple jokes there. This is a note from Spas in Moravia, in the Jeseníky town, where he used to go with Zuzana's father. There is a note on the second sheet, if you see it on the side, because you can see that there is no Jan Masaryk written, right? So he didn't want to get any attention, apparently, so he put a fake name, Jan Říha, and later on, after the war, Zuzana's mother asked Jan Masaryk to actually put a note there and get it signed that it's really him for her daughter. Maybe you have a question, since I already told you that they were in Terezín concentration camp, how they kept all these documents. Because, of course, their apartment was taken away by Nazis right at the beginning of the war. So as I mentioned, she had this governess, Fridolina, who, of course, was fired because they couldn't no longer have her in their house, and she was basically part of the family, so she took all their belongings and hid it in her own, in the town where she was from. And, of course, as we know the history, the Jewish people started to be persecuted at the beginning of 40s, and the kids couldn't go to schools anymore, they couldn't go to movies, they couldn't go to playgrounds. Basically, where they were allowed to play, the only place where kids could play was cemeteries. Their former friends, as I said former, they were not friends anymore. They were avoiding them in the streets because, of course, they were scared of what could happen. Here is a memory how she felt about as a child.
Když jsem byla malá a jezdila jsem do Želitavy, tak jsem se někdy prala, já jsem si nenechala nic líbit, ale to mě vysvětlili, že kdyby mě nějaký německý dítě napadlo, že se nemůžu bránit. A tak jsme se snažili nechodit tou ulicí, ale jednou jsem s přítelkyní šla domů z útulku a německá holka, která byla asi 2krát tak veliká jako já, nás začala bít. A mně se podařilo utíct, ale mý přítelkyni ne. A já jsem přišla domů a potom potom jsem měla často bolení hlavy, protože jsem se cítila velmi vinná, že jsem utekla, moje přítelkyně tam zůstala s tou velkou holkou. Tak to nám nikdo nemusel vysvětlovat, že se máme bát. My jsme se báli, protože Němci byli všude a potom jsme slyšeli ty všechny hrozné historie. Ale samozřejmě nevěděli jsme v té době o Osvětimi.
The Pick family received orders to go to concentration camp in Terezín in 1942, but Zuzana was at that time sick. She was sick with scarlet fever, and that actually postponed their arrival, and they ended up going to Terezín in 1943. By that time, she said it probably helped them a little, because she said by that time they already knew from letters from their friends and family from the camp, like how to get ready for those hard conditions. So she said we knew we need to pack really warm clothes. We took as much food as we could. She remembered that their cook was preparing like little caramels, because of course sugar was, not so much available there. So they really ended up there in 1943. Of course, they separated the family. Women stayed in an attic together with like big crowd of people. They only got a space of 2 beds. That was basically their living space. In 1944, in October 1944, their father perished in Auschwitz. She was able to actually bring him all the way to the train. She signed up for a volunteering job to bring her father all the way, and that's how she said goodbye, and she never saw him again. Towards the end of the war, when she said that there were already rumors that the war is about to be finished, also the trains from East started to come to Terezín, and here is another memory that when she remembers what was going on.
Když to opravdu skoro končilo, tak začaly přicházet vlaky z východu s lidma, kteří byli polomrtví, a bylo tam taky hodně mrtvých v těch vlacích. A my jsme tam chodili s Petrem hledat jeho bratry a mýho tatínka. Ale měli jsme to zakázané od maminek, ale chodili jsme tam stejně. To už potom byl skoro konec a my jsme najednou měli cukr, kostky cukru, já nevím odkud. A my jsme nosili ty kostky cukru sebou k těm vlakům, a když jsme potkali někoho, koho jsme znali, tak jsme jim dali ten cukr. A tam jeden muž, mladý muž, kterýho jsem nepoznala, a tam seděl u toho vlaku a ten jsem najednou slyšela Zuzano a já jsem ho nepoznala, ale byl to Miloš Gláze a já jsem mu tenkrát dala cukr. A to byl potom můj první muž.
As I said, Zuzana's father didn't survive the war, but her beloved 2 cousins did, and they reunited in Terezín, and they were able to get a car somewhere, and they basically brought the whole family back to Prague. Zuzana didn't come to Prague with them because she signed up for the program called Castle Program, which was a program offered to children who survived the war during camps and who were not able to be part of education, of course. So this is a document that says that Zuzana Piková back then is part of this program. She moved for a couple of weeks to this castle called Kamenice, and basically they were working with them. They were trying to give them proper education so they could catch up actually before the school year, because of course they wanted to start the school year, which starts at the beginning of September in Czechoslovakia. Zuzana, after the war, she said that the 3 years of freedom before the communist putsch were just years of very much freedom and no worries, no problems. She remembers that she was actually the only Jewish person in her high school, but when I asked her about if her classmates were actually asking about her experience during the war, she said nobody ever talked about nothing. It was a big taboo at those times. But as I said, she enjoyed her young years. She was very good at handball, and she was really enjoying theater until the beginning of 1948, when her uncle, who previously, before the war, escaped to Argentina, he came back and he was like, he saw what was happening in the country, and he said, you guys cannot stay here. I have to bring you with me. I'm responsible for you, so you have to come with me. Zuzana wasn't happy about it because, as I said, she was living the great life in Prague and she had a lot of friends, but of course she had to listen to the family. And later on, she realized that that was the best decision for her life. What I want to also say is, like, I cannot tell the full story because that story, I can be here for 3 hours only saying Miss Zuzana's story, and I encourage you to visit our website. I will have my cards in the back. You can take it, and you please, if you are more interested, go for it, because there are so many details that are popping up now, but I just don't have enough time to tell all of it. What I definitely want to say is she lived in Argentina. She finished her high school there, and she realized she would love to come to US and study dancing. She wanted to be a dancer, but then she had an injury while skiing, so that was over. So she ended up studying Russian literature, and when we skip like maybe 30 years, we get to times when in 1986, her mother, who still lived in Argentina but was visiting Prague every year to visit her son, Zuzana's brother, who decided not to go with them to Argentina because he was already adult. Her mother heard in the Jewish community that they're actually organizing a reunion of those kids from Terezin. So she was like, look, this is really interesting topic. Would you like to do something with it? And this was a first idea for Zuzana's career as a film documentarist, as she later on visited that reunion in Prague, and she made her first documentary on that called Terezin Diary, where she met some of other survivors as Helga Hošková and so on. And those, later on, she interviewed them for her another documentary that she actually got Emmy Award for. So she really became passionate about it, and I think that's what we have in common, that we believe that those stories can be really helpful also for the next generation, as they can be a source of strength and inspiration for all of us. I was very happy to meet her in person last fall. She is walking in Central Park every day if her health and weather allows, and she is my personal inspiration. When I met her last time, I was like, Miss Zuzana, when I'm 94 years, I want to be like you. So it was my pleasure, and I really invite you for looking for her stories, her films. You can find them online. Let's move on to the second story. This is very, very personal also, because you can tell how the history really changed people's life for the whole life, not just for the time being of the war. Mr. Petr Schwarz Lobal lives in San Francisco. He was born in 1932, also into Jewish family. As he said, they were never practicing Judaism. It was only basically something they inherited. And his father was a lawyer, He was very famous, apparently, in Prague before the war, very, very educated person. His mother was also from a very well-known and rich family. So, you know, if you say that, you would think you have a pretty good start for life. But he was born in the wrong time, let's say, because, you know, all those things that were normal when he was born a couple years later were illegal. So their relationship of the parents were not strong, though, so they got divorced before the war started, and it obviously had consequences because his father, he had a new girlfriend at the beginning of the war. They moved to countryside because they thought it would be safer for them. And at the same time, he was always thinking how to get them out of the country. So the new girlfriend, Lotte, she had a sister. The sister lived in Paris. So he was trying to get them out of there. So there was this way how to get Peter out of the, you know, dangerous country at those times already. But how do you tell his mother, look, I want to take your son and, you know, flee? So he says that was very emotional. Even though he was little, it was very, very emotional. And he remembers the last time he saw his mother, who obviously agreed, because it was also at those times when they were hearing the stories already, you know, what's going on with Jews and like what's probably ahead of them. So he remembers how his mother just told him, look, you might go to different family, just always remember, respect them, and they might be from different religion, be open to it, and be always respectful to those people. This is Peter on the left as a little boy before the war, and on the right side he is with his mother, and there is a National Theater behind them. Maybe you recognize that. Here he remembers actually another very interesting part of their journey, because they really went on one of the last trains from Prague to Paris. They lived there until the Paris was occupied by Nazis. So then they flew to the southern France, where was a big community of Czechoslovaks, and his father obviously had connections with a lot of people because he was also part of resistance and so on. So he was able to get them on a ship that took them to Britain.
Byla loď, uhelná loď, ta vozila uhlí ze severní Anglie, z Newcastle do jižní Francie, kde potřebovali uhlí. A tak na té lodi nařídili, aby vzali český vojáky. A tak jsme tam jeli do toho přístavu a byli jsme tam s Lotte a tu rampu hlídali čeští vojáci, důstojníci. A já jsem tam prostě vešel, jako kluk jsem šel na loď. Mně se to líbilo. A pak jsem se koukal dolů, jak se hádá táta s českýma důstojníkama, protože nechtěli nechat Němku na loď. A nakonec ta loď musela odjet, tak viděl jsem, jak táta jí dal všechny peníze a naskočil na loď.
He explained later that Lotte, even though she was German, she was part of anti-fascism movement. That's why also her sister was already based in Paris. He, of course, was a little child, and I always love to listen. You know, even these stories are really horrific and scary and really strong. I love asking them about just the playful memories, because at the end they were children, and he actually had so many really funny stories from the ship, because he said it was a coal ship, so there was a dust, you know, everywhere. So he's like, we all looked like chimney sweeps after a couple days. So I mean, couple even hours, not couple days. So he had really great memories about that. They eventually arrived to Britain. They traveled by train to London, where his father got in touch with the exile government, and he was working for the exile government in London as a law specialist and advisor for President Beneš. And of course, there was no mother, as you saw the mention before, that Peter was very affected by that he was taken away from the mother, and then there was this girlfriend who had to, she was kind of mother number two. She had to stay in France, so he was very lonely, and father was very active and very hardworking, so he sent Peter to the Czechoslovak school that was also founded by the President Beneš exile government over there, and that hosted the Winton's children. Are we familiar here with the Winton story? So Nicholas Winton saved hundreds of children from Czechoslovakia, brought them to Britain, found families for them, and they had the school there also for those children, and also for children of the government workers or even soldiers who flew to Britain. So Peter was one of them, and again he recalls that it was the best times of his lives because he had such freedom. He could like run around in the British countryside and fish in the streams and so on. So again, the children's memories can be also happy. The war ended eventually, and his father got back with the government first. Peter and his friends, they arrived later on a plane. He said he remembers that his father picked him up from the airport in the official luxury government's car already, because he was part of the Czechoslovak government after the war. But even though I was telling you he was always, on the liberal side, later on, he became part of the Communist Party, and he was actually working for the Minister of Interior Affairs Václav Nosek. And one of his jobs in Prague was that he was looking for apartments for the Soviet advisors. So basically the apartments that were empty after the German officials, who obviously went back to Germany, those that were empty, this person was looking for those for the Soviet advisors. At those times, when again father was very busy, I forgot to mention something very, very important, and that is the story of Peter's mother. Because during his stay in Britain, once he came to the father's office and he saw a letter there saying something about the death of the mom. And he was so scared because he couldn't believe it, of course. So he apparently didn't even ask the father for many weeks. And later on, the father finally came to him and told him, look, mom was, she died, okay? And he didn't want to tell him the full story because he was little. So finally, when they came back, he says like that was the first moment when they came back. He asked him finally, Daddy, like where is the mommy? Like what happened? And he finally told him that she died. It is really emotional for me to keep saying all of those horrible things, but she hanged herself in a cell. After she was arrested. They say that they don't really know what exactly happened, but they think that they arrested her because they realized that her ex-husband is actually part of the exile resistance. So it was another, I think, shock and trauma for him that he actually later on was writing about in his blog, how he realized it really like maybe 60 years later, like, how this experience affected him in relationships and so on. But again, there is this funny thing because, of course, Peter knew how to speak English, and father sent him from Prague to a small town, Písek, that was back then exactly on the demarcation line between American and Soviet parts. And so you can tell there were a lot of American soldiers, and there were lots of Czech girls who liked the American soldiers. So he said he was basically their translator, and he was getting lots of chocolates and cigarettes and all the good stuff. So it was definitely, he said, the most adventurous summer of his life before the school started, and he had to go back to Prague. Again, if you understand Czech, you can see that he was not a very good student. Okay, and again, he was saying that it was all affected by the, by the horrors of the war that he had get through. So his father was not very happy with him, but even though they figured it out. And in 50s, his father actually was persecuted because of his Jewish heritage, because there were big communist trials, political trials, when they got rid of the main Jewish politicians, and his father was one of them. He lost his job, and they still let him work for the ministry, but in very much like lower position. Peter, at the end, he finished his high school. He eventually finished his studies at college, but he was not happy in Czechoslovakia, and he said he wanted to see world, and he knew that his aunt lives in Canada. So he made this plan of just going to Canada. But obviously in 50s, it wasn't just like that, like go to Canada. So he made a trip to Egypt. He bought an official trip to Egypt. As you see, this is a picture from Egypt. And in Egypt, he just decided to go to Canadian embassy and ask them for asylum. So Canadians told him no. He goes to American embassy. He says, okay, we'll take you. Next. So this is just a postcard of his father sending him greetings when he was already in New York. He eventually came to New York, and there's this last really interesting thing I want to mention here, and that is that whenever he starts studying in Los Angeles University, he wanted his father to bring him or mail him a diploma, but the secret police found it.
Tak jsem to dal vědět tátovi, a že mi chybí ten diplom, a táta se snažil mi to poslat, a Češi to věděli, že jsme ve styku, a našli ten. Tátovi měli za zlý, a tak ho zavřeli, ale jenom na pár týdnů. Táta jim říkal, no, dali mu do vězení nějakého špeha, jo? A táta mluvil o sebevraždě, že nepustí ven a tak dále. A zřejmě to hlásil dál, a tak se rozhodli to nechat být. Tak tátu propustili.
So, as I mentioned, every story that I recorded with those people here, it always also affected those families that stayed behind, right? So in this case, it was his father, but later on, the father started visiting, and they could be in touch until the end of the father's life. Here is just the last picture, Peter with the Nicholas Winton in one of the reception with those children that he saved and that they studied in Britain during the war. The next story is about Jan Tomeček. It's, again, completely different story. Mr. Tomeček was born in 1926 in the Moravian area close to Slovakian border. So that story is, again, completely different. And why I picked this one is that that area was very much active with the partisans in the mountains. And he was a part of something very interesting at the end of the Second World War. Of course, after the war, this was a big part of the Czechoslovak history that the communists, were unifying the farms, and his family was one of the witnesses of that and victims of that. We, as I said, we've worked with the archives, and I was very lucky here that I found this chronicle of the village where he's from. He's from the small village called Tvarožná Lhota, and I was able to email to the library if they have any kind of source, and they scanned me this beautiful chronicle, like written after the war, all the memories you see day by day. the story of Mr. Tomeček's family is that his father was anti-fascist, and his friend became actually the fascist mayor of the village. So they didn't like each other, and he kind of arranged a trap of the family. At the end of the war, some guys who presenting themselves as partisans came to their house. First, just saying, we need food, can you help us? So they helped them, but they didn't want to really be part of the group. Then it happened for the second time, then third time, and then at the third time, the young Tomeček said, okay, we'll help you somehow, give you a bike, you know, like just be part of it a little. It turned out that they were actually the German officers just trying to provoke them. So what happened is that the Germans came to the house and tried to find those boys, because in the meantime they escaped because they figured it out, so they were now hiding. And let's see what happened after all that drama.
Jsem byl skovaný v těch stotovách, tak já jsem došel, jak ti Němci odešli, vyšel jsem z té stotovy a ty můj kamarád okolo můj pochodík, my se tam potkali. No, tak jsme šli jako do toho našeho krytu. No a číkaj, skoro ráno, takový 5 hodin ráno už bylo, takový buchot venku, toto střílení a si zabouchal na ty dveře, na ten krytě a křičí German yet, German yet, German yet, a to byl Rusák. Oni to byli Rusé a ruská armáda pokračovali, pravda, už hnali těch Němců před sebou jako na západ, ven.
He has also a really interesting memory that part of the Red Army was this Romanian division, and he says the Romanian division actually parked in their farm courtyard, and they had a bunch of horses. Of course, he was a young male, so he was in touch with them. And he had this story when he saw that one of the soldiers had skis on the wagon, and he liked the skis. So he basically asked him if he wanna sell it to him. So he offered him 50 crowns, but the soldier wanted 100 Romanian lei. An officer told him that that was about 20 crowns, so it was pretty good deal. So he exchanged the money and bought the skis. He took them home and hid it in the attic under straw. So again, an example of, you know, the boys are boys, and he thought this was really something cool. As I said, after the end of the war, they were part, because they had pretty big field as the family, and they were part of the communist persecution that of the collective farms. The father didn't really want to give up, but at the end he had to.
No a když komunisté zakládali JZD a to všecko pravda, ten socialismus, tak my jsme měli dost hrubé hospodářství, přes 9 hektárů a její rodina také byla. A tak oni si, fádr se s něma velice netentoval, nekmucháčkoval, a tak oni si nás vybrali jako vzorek na to přepsání na tého JZD. A naši, pravda, můj otec, to nechtěli podepsat, tu transparenci toho soukromého majetku do toho JZD, tak ji zlikvidovali prostě. Já jsem měl dom z roboty, a dojedu k našemu, jsem jezdil na motorce, dojedu k našemu, u našeho nákladní auta a lidí, co se děje, a než jsem dojel do Lhoty, na naše dědiny, tak už jsem potkal jednoho takového to mi trochu šek na hlavu, už žijou s našima koňma, už po dědinu už žijou s našima koňma bez voza Bešeckého. Pán, co jde? Tak oni ty koně zebrali a v Čílkách nakládali ten dobytek, co jsme měli doma. Krávy a to ostatní. Likvidovali nás prostě.
The family really lost almost everything. This is Mr. Tomeček's father. They lived their normal life. He got married, but later on, during 60s, when people start traveling abroad, his wife came to America, and she only came to America because she was born in America. Again, another story. I can be here another 1 hour. She came here in 1964 to visit her family. And when she came back, she said to family, look, I think it would be really great if we join our family. So eventually, after the Soviets occupied Czechoslovakia in August 1968, they waited a little, and then in 1969, they again applied for official vacation to US. The communists let them. They came here to New York, but they knew they're not coming back. So there was no vacation. This was a plan of staying here forever. They were actually very lucky that they had a family here, so the family could help them at the beginning to find them jobs and to settle down. And Mr. Tomeček was a big part of a community in Long Island, where they were celebrating all different kind of Czech and Moravian festivals, and also Christian Catholic festivals. The last story, this is Miss Želmíra Živná. She was born 1937. She lives in San Francisco, and she was born in an area that was called Sudetenland. That was an area of German inhabitants. And her family actually came from, her mother was from Slovakia, her father was from Bohemia. So they were like really Czechoslovak family. And here is, again, her memory, how they had to leave Sudetenland.
V Sudetech to proběhlo tak, že české obyvatelstvo muselo opustit sudetské území během 24 hodin. Muži byli v ten moment většinou na hranicích, protože než se to dohodlo, tak čekali, že budou bránit tu zemi. A takže maminka měla moji sestru, který byly 3 roky a já jsem byla rok a musela s námi během 24 hodin opustit tu vesnici, kde jsme bydleli. Takže vzala kočár, naložila, co mohla a dostala se do vlaku, kde tedy stála a měla ten kočár. A od staršího pana učitele, jmenoval se Fibiger a ráda na něj vzpomínám, dostala dobrou radu, jeďte na Berounsko do městečka, znám tam faráře, ví, co se děje a je ochoten rodiny uprchlíků ze Sudet nechat bydlet na faře, oni tam mají velikou halu, veliký sál. Takže ta maminka s námi odjela do Rakovníka a pak na Beroun do toho městečko. Je to krásné místo na Berounce.
So this is an example of a family that became refugee family in their own country after the München agreement or Munich agreement. She also remembers after the war, as they came back to their hometown, she was a witness of the process of sending Germans back to Germany. At the end, over 2 million Germans left Czechoslovakia after the Second World War. And she remembered how, it took some time because some families were still waiting for their fathers, maybe German soldiers, that they would actually come back. Here is actually Želmíra greeting Miss Hanna Benešová as they were visiting with President Beneš in their small town. This is Želmíra's father greeting him. She later on started studying journalism in Charles University. This picture on the right, if somebody is here who knows Czech politics after revolution, this is Mr. Jiří Dienstbier. He was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They were classmates. 1968 in Prague. She was a journalist. She was working for a very famous magazine at those time, and she was one of those who were interviewing people in the streets and Soviet soldiers, and who were basically illegally crossing the river Vltava because the bridges were always guarded by the Soviet soldiers. They weren't people let go through the bridges, so they were actually using the ferry on the river to get the newspaper, to get the material to the publisher and to the printer. This again was one of the main reasons for them later on to realize that they cannot stay in the country anymore, and also the problems that she was a friend with Jiří Dinsbír, who became part of the dissent. She actually gave a name to his book. He wrote a book undercover. She put her name on the book so he could actually publish it, and that made of course trouble for her. The secret police start calling her for interrogations, and she and her husband decided to go. They were successful and they flew from their vacation in Yugoslavia. They later on moved to San Francisco, and she was helping with refugees her whole life. That was basically her giving back. And this is her with her husband in San Francisco. Thank you so much for being here today and listening to the stories. I would like to thank you to the SVU and the Czech Center. And please don't go away yet, because we have two people from our New York Czechoslovak community that I would like to now welcome them here. It's going to be Mr. Paul Ort and Miss Georgina Seiger. Did I say it right? Come here. So it's my pleasure again to have two members of our community here today. Both of them have really, really strong stories about those times. Maybe let's start with Miss Georgina. Please tell us, you were a little child, and I know that you lived through the war only with your mother. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Well, when the war started, practically I was born 1931, and 1939 the war already started in Czech Republic, which means that I was not even 8 years old. My father, which was electro engineer, he was living in Prague, and he has to go to the military because he was like a captain, and he left us. Then he was working for the Škoda work, and then after 3 months after he go for the war, he came back because the soldier in Czech Republic find that they will be only able to fight in the Czech border. But then when already the German got the Polish, we also have the border with the Poland. And we didn't have so many soldiers, which means that the Czech soldier told then we couldn't fight. Mm-hmm. And my father came back. Because he was working for the Škoda work, they sent him immediately to Romania to build power plant, which means that we stay with the mother in Prague, but we didn't see the father practically after the war, after the 46.
So you also were a victim of war in that case,
yes.
And Paul here definitely, because his mother and his grandparents were executed by Nazis. Please, can you tell us the story? It's going to be a long story, so let me...
It's a little bit of a sad story. I was thinking more along the lines You may be wondering, Georgina is 94 and I am 89. So I was 9 years old. You may be wondering how these people made it that long, but it's because Georgina organizes the dances at the Czech Center. And we go dancing here about 3 or 4 times a year. And I actually invite you very much because there are not too many Czechs who come. It's mostly American. There is not that much ballroom dancing. But I am bringing it up because maybe it's the dancing that made us live that long.
I am sure. I am sure. But we need to mention at least a little, because your family was part of such historic event. Would you like to say what your grandfather was part of?
My grandfather was the person who offered to hide the parachutist who killed Heydrich. He offered the shelter in the Czech Orthodox Church in Reslova ulice in Prague. So once they were betrayed, there was a public trial, and the bishop Gorast and the priests Petřek and Čikl and my grandfather, they were executed by firing squad in Kobylisy. And my parents were divorced, and my father had custody of 3 of us. My mother remarried. So that saved our lives, actually. So the Nazis took her to Terezin, and later with the group of all the families of the people who were involved in the Heydrich affair, they went to Mauthausen, and she perished in Mauthausen with the entire group, about 298 Czech families.
Also, we have Paul's memories on the Paměť národa, Memory of Nations website. If you're interested, you can read the full story. And we are working currently with Miss Georgina on her life story. One last thing, because as we said, it affects your whole life, all those early memories. Is there any testimony, any kind of message you would like to give to us, to the generations that are here and that are dealing with, lots of uncertainties in our times too? And Paul is already giving me a little smile, so I'm expecting something really encouraging. No pressure.
I don't know what I can give to the people now. Why I should speak about what? About more through the war, or?
About, for example, you came later on to America. Do you think that, the early experience that you had to live through tough times helped you later on through other difficult, tough situations?
No, then will be a very big story, because after that, when we didn't see the father, my mother finished in Prague and we went to Třebíč. And then my mother had to do something with us. She wasn't getting any money from the father, absolutely nothing. And then she had a very good grandmother. We have very good grandmother, and she had big property. And then my mother started to make business with coal and wood, and then we was capitalist. And then after the 48, when the communists took over, this was horrible. I was 18 years old. The communists take my mother, me, put us to the prison. I have story of my life that will be for one book.
Then hopefully you will write it one day.
No, but when I am in Ostrava and you have the paměti. I already practically was 2 times, and I was giving them my part of the life. And now I am going again, which means that I will continue, and perhaps you can write something about me in the book after I will be not here.
And you also, I don't want to finish in a sad note, but you told me a really interesting memory from those times at the end of the war. Would you like to share what you actually saw, like how you saw those German soldiers leaving?
Oh, yes. I was 13 years old that time in Třebíč, and through the street all of a sudden was bringing the German, all those soldiers which they took, and some still can walk, some was helping to get walk, and I ran home and took some bread and some water and bringing to them. And all of a sudden I hear, "Help, help!" And I already gave it to them, and all of a sudden I see big Gestapo guy with the revolver right on me. And I don't know where I took the guts. I was 13 years old. I said to myself, in case when I turn, he will shoot me from the back. No! In that case, when he likes to shoot me, he has to shoot me in the front. And I was, with my eyes, I was looking to his eyes, very, very strong. And all of a sudden, I see that the hand with the revolver was going very slowly down. And I said to myself, perhaps he has also daughter, because he completely took the hand with the revolver like that. But I was looking to his eyes, and then I very slowly turned and very slowly was going back to my house. That's other story.
I think we can hardly imagine anything like that. Paul, would you like to add your memories from the days of May 1945 in Prague?
That memory, as you are you sure you want me to bring it up? It's gross.
It is gross, but it's part of it. And then I'll do one last question that is going to be nice and positive. So let's hear it.
All the people who spoke here were so distinguished, and it's such a gruesome story, and you want me to tell these people? But anyway, I was 9 years old, and I probably liked growth. You know, that's what you do when you that's how you are. When you are young. So naturally we were excited about the end of the war. We lived near National Theatre, Národní divadlo, and we used to go to Joffin Island. So we were watching the river Vltava, and there were floating, these bodies were floating, and they were all so fat, so I was asking my brothers, how come these Nazis are all so fat? Well, they were not fat, they were decomposing, as they were floating, because the Czechs, they didn't want to bury them in the Czech lands, they decided they would send them, to Vltava, Mělník, Labe, Děčín, Dresden. In retrospect, I am not quite sure they made it that far, because, there are fish, the bottom feeders, carp, and frogs and turtles, and all kinds of animals that thrive on material. So that's my memory of the end of the world. I told you it was gross, so I apologize.
Thank you both for your memories, because those testimonies are, I think, important, even though they're gross or sad or horrendous, because it reminds us. I always, I'll be very personal now. Whenever I have bad times, when I feel down, I'm like, what do I complain about? I go and I listen to one of those stories, or I read the story, and it actually really helps me, and it encourages me and gives me hope that even in those really difficult times, there is something in the humanity that we can actually prevail and we can manage. So thank you so much for your experience. Hopefully it was inspirational for all of you. Thank you so much for coming, and again for the whole Bohemian National Hall for hosting us.
I want to thank all the panelists for sharing their stories with us, and to Julia for talking about her project. I think I promised not to ask you any hard questions, but I can't resist to ask just one, and that is, when you collect these stories of people's personal memories, do you ever worry about them leaving out memories that they don't want to share because of the way it might compromise how they are understood, because of various actions that either they were involved in personally or their family's actions? Basically, people leave out a lot when they share personal memories. Thank you.
That is absolutely great question, and we of course always worry about it. How we try to work is that me as a journalist, I am used to fact-checking stuff. Of course, not every time you can fact-check everything, but that's why we cooperate with a lot of historians. We always try to find as many sources as we can. So, for example, the case of Mr. Tomeček, when he was telling me the story, there was a lot of things that I really didn't understand from his talking. So I was like, it doesn't make sense to me. I need to find another source which is going to explain me. And then I am emailing, I'm trying to look for stuff. So that's always like really, difficult work, because it's not just the 2 hours of interviews, like it's those next hours of like digging other sources. Also, that's a great question on, for example, interviewing people who lived during communism and who may have been working with the Secret Service and so on. So we also work with those archives and get those files and try to always study, from all different kind of sources before we actually question, and we try to do as much as we can.
I want to thank all of you, and you both have these eyes that just twinkle, so we love you. Julia, as a journalist, I want to ask you a question. Don't let history repeat itself. What advice do you have for us with history is repeating itself?
What advice?
For America, what we're going through right now, because it's repeating itself. Thank you.
That's a very, very difficult question, and I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that. But my personal answer and my personal attitude is to educate yourself, and that's what I use as a way how to fight losing of democracy and freedom. Is I always, whenever we have some kind of discussions with people, I'm like, please just read books, don't read social media, don't comment, like don't get into fights that have no other solution. So, and that's what I'm trying to do with my children. And that's another, for example, way how I can promote this project, because I offered it to a school where my daughter goes to in New Orleans, and we will definitely cooperate for the next school year and present stories like that to 6th and 7th graders, because I believe that educating in early age is very important, because they're going to be voters very soon.
And to follow up on that today, I have a few students of my Czech online class here precisely for that reason, so that it's not just us, like older people who want to recall what happened, but also young generation. So I think that's really one of the main things you can do. Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions?
So thank you so much for coming over here and sharing your advice and so forth. One question I have is, you both are in 80s and 90s. What is your secret for keeping your memory so sharp and still remembering things so well, right?
Dancing.
What keeps you sharp and what keeps you in a good shape and your memory? Well, is it the dancing they're giving? Let me turn it on.
Hardly, because I am 94, I hardly hear your question.
So what keeps you in a good shape? And your mind?
Good memory. What do you do to still remember so much?
08684 plus 420.
I came to United States in 1970. And that time I was 40 years old. I was able to get only $5 change from the communist country. But I have over here sister, which was here from 64, and I have some place to sleep. And I have to start completely new life. And I was working for 15 years. I got 2 jobs, 3 jobs sometime, for 15 years in America, and done my first job over here because I came no English language. I have to start to learn English. And my first job was in the Praha restaurant, which is on 73rd Street, when was on 73rd Street and 1st Avenue. And the first sentence, because we couldn't speak any other language, only Russian or German in Czech Republic on the communist era. I learned, please, can I check your code? And then how I start in America, in New York. Well, practically I am here from the 1970, and I was able, with my 2 hands and with the head, which I have made the American dream. And practically this building, which was built, the Czech emigrants, same like what they built in Prague, the Národní divadlo, that was giving money. Then I start, because I was in the Czech restaurant, and this was big Czech groups of sportsmen, which they took me in. And practically we was the first group which we have $5,000, and we was putting, and we was able to come to this Bohemian Benevolent Literary Association. And we start, but the building was in horrible shape, and we couldn't get any mortgage, nothing. But then somehow we was doing, and after the German wall came down, I came to the idea perhaps we can give back to the Czech Republic the building. And then practically now you see the building, but this floor, the 3rd floor, still for the Czech emigrants, and we can do everything over here. and practically I was, when you really like to know my life, I was 55. I was getting married over here, and I got a beautiful husband, Dr. Seger. He was eye doctor, and 21 years ago he died, but I still, since that time, all the time practically in this building.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I have to confirm what Georgina is saying, how true it is. I already told you about the dancing. That's one of her secrets, why she is so alive. And being a cornerstone of this organization and a Czech Center that helps too. When Georgina was 90, this center gave a big dance party for her, and I had the great pleasure to ask Georgina for a dance. So that's one of my memories. It's interesting that you ask that question because when you reach certain age, people start asking you this question. So I actually had to give it some thought. You know, besides doing what everybody is supposed to do, exercising and eating healthy diet, there are some psychological approaches how you can perhaps succeed. One of them occurred to me when you often reach kind of a crossroad when you have to decide, should I give up certain activities or can I keep doing it? I think in that situation, if you still really have a choice, in other words, the health, etc., that you should always decide for doing it. I was facing this question. That's probably how I came to it this winter. I went skiing, and at the end of the day, I noticed my ski boot was falling apart. I was thinking, is it a hint? Maybe I should really quit skiing. But I decided no, and I went to Paragon, and I was buying new new boots. And then he said, well, you know, how old are your skis and binding? And of course, you know, he said, well, you need a new bindings and new skis, you know. So I was facing this dilemma, you know, should I really invest this today? It's pretty expensive. But I decided to go ahead and I bought a whole new equipment. And luckily there was another ski weekend this winter, so I tested the equipment on one day and everything worked beautifully. So I'm looking for the next winter, you know.
Okay, so I think that's a wonderful story. That's the right positive note to end with. So let's give it once more to our guests. Also to Julia, our time is up. However, if you have any more questions you didn't get to ask, I know there was one more here, please ask now. You are invited to have some wine, some refreshments, and we can still talk informally. Thank you very much for coming.